This is for those who believe in the potential of science, making brave choices, choosing to push the boundaries. This is why we believe in what science can do.
Good morning, everyone. Nice crowd. As you can see, the title of my talk is a play off of a popular television show. Are you all actually familiar with it, though? You look a little young. Okay, so imagine the theme music playing in the background as I talk here. Instead of CSI standing for Crime Scene Investigation, I'm using it to stand for Count on Statistics for Investigation. What I'm doing here is actually serving as, if you will, a marketing spiel to give you a sense of what I do on the day-to-day and to encourage you to consider statistics as a career choice. So my first question to you is, well, what is statistics? How would you define statistics? Yeah. You said using logic to figure out problems. Okay, so certainly you could say that encompasses mathematics in general. Yeah. So looking at different things to try and find out answers. Okay, that's a good way to put it. Let's take one more.
Collecting data.
Collecting data. Okay, so these are all good examples for encompassing what is statistics. In general, when we speak of statistics, we call it the science of uncertainty. So what's the idea here? There is some unknown truth. As a statistician, I'm seeking to find the truth. Okay, so I want to know the truth about some population, whether it's people, animals, things, something as a whole. All right, but of course, so that whole is what we call our population, what you see in the larger circle in green. But of course, you can't necessarily study everyone in your population. That takes too much time, too much money, too much effort. So what do you do instead? You pull a sample from that population that hopefully serves as a representation of the whole unit. Okay? So with that sample, you're collecting data associated with them to get an idea of what happens in your overall truth. And so there you're producing your data and studying it. That's that exploratory data analysis, right? So you're probably familiar with your histograms, your pie charts, your general pictures that you use or figures to try and understand what's happening in your data in general, just to get a sense of what's happening. And from there, you develop probability models and statistical inference to try and understand something about your truth. And as you see, this is a circular argument here because we can always refine and fine-tune our estimates to get an understanding of the ultimate truth. Okay, so that's the what behind statistics. But why study statistics? Why study statistics? If you're anything like me, you like to problem solve. You like mysteries. When I was a kid, I loved reading Encyclopedia Brown stories, right? The whodunits, okay? And you try not to, just jump to the end to find out the answer. You want to try and figure it out before you read the final answer. Sherlock Holmes, as I grew up, I started reading Sherlock Holmes novels and looking at the movies, watching Murder, She Wrote for the parents in the room. That was a favorite. And now for the kids, it's CSI, right? Whether it's CSI Las Vegas, CSI New York, CSI Virtual. I mean, they have all different versions of it now. Okay, but this general idea of solving problems, solving mysteries, was always fun to me. And that's exactly what you're doing in mathematics in general, but in particular for statistics. You're trying to understand this unknown truth, trying to solve a mystery. Another reason to pursue statistics, data are everywhere. You in this room represent data. I could ask how many people are in the room and how that number changes over time. Okay, it's a number that would vary, right? It depends on your session, it depends on the speakers, how fascinating you find the speakers, how much the room can accommodate. There are all these different variables that have to be considered, okay? And with that, there are any number of questions that could be asked. For example, we could consider what's called a logistic regression model. A logistic regression so the idea here is where the response variable takes a value of 0 or 1. So what do I mean by a response here? I want to know, is something good or bad? Is it represented by a male or a female? Something with only 2 outcomes. Is it successful? Is it a failure? Again, something with only 2 outcomes. And I want to understand how an explanatory variable relates to this outcome variable. So in this example, we have a medical representation where we're looking at an amount of dosage and the impact on a disease. Okay, can it cure a disease or not? So you can imagine a pharmacy studying the impact of the amount of dosage taken for some medication and how it cures an ailment. Okay, so as you can see, the line or curve that you're seeing here represents the probability of healing, let's say. So you can imagine picking a particular cutoff as the pharmacist to say, and then backtracking to see where that dose value falls to say, okay, well, this is the amount of dosage that you need to take or at this particular frequency to help cure the ailment. Okay, so how does that all translate? It translates into those details on your medicine or pill dispenser, okay, when it tells you how much dosage to take, right? This is what's happening behind the scenes. Another example with statistics is spatial statistics, understanding how things correlate with space. Here you're looking at the impact for tornado activity. And what's represented here is what we call a heat map, where light, the white or yellow, represents a small number, or frequency of tornadoes, and as the color gets deeper, it represents a larger number of tornadoes. Okay, so for example here, what can you see or infer from this picture? You may not want to live in the Midwest unless, you want to have your Wizard of Oz experience. Okay, so that's what we can see from this heat map. Another example, you may not think this to be the case, but anyone that's interested in English, oftentimes I have English majors that think they will never have to take a math class again, which is why they pursue English. However, even English can be translated through statistics. Here's an example. Let's say you heard on the news there is some manuscript that is unnamed as the author. Who wrote that manuscript? Okay, let's say, for example, could it have been William Shakespeare? So what do? You can use statistics to try and figure this out. How do you do that? There's a whole subfield within statistics called text mining. And in text mining, the text, which represent the words, are actually measured as data themselves. So you can ask about the frequency that the words have appeared. You can ask how those words connect to each other and ask about correlations and understand how they relate to other standard manuscripts from known authors to try and assess the probability that it came from a particular author. So even English people, English majors, have the ability to use statistics to their advantage. In fact, there is a company, here's another, you can argue this is another trivia question, but no prize, sorry. There is a company that has made, multi-million, multi-billion-dollar industry out of text mining. Can anyone guess what that company is? Yeah. Boom, Google. Okay, that's exactly what Google does. What do? You give it keywords, it spits out the words, or it looks at those words and finds those words in other texts or documents, okay? And then gives you a listing of the documents or manuscripts that you are probably interested in based on the keywords that you gave, okay? So look at all the money that came from founders with interests in mathematics and statistics. All right, from here, let's talk about a few famous names in the fields of statistics. Does anyone know the name Nate Silver? Interesting. Adults are raising their hands for Nate Silver, which I can appreciate, because for the kids, you're still a little too young to worry about this, okay? But while On some level, Nate Silver got his reputation for working in statistics and sports. He really gained national and international recognition. I'll give you a hint, in 2008 and 2012. What happened in 2008 and 2012? Well, actually, no, so I won't, well, the consideration was a financial crash, but not that. Yes. The presidential elections. The presidential elections in 2008, Nate Silver correctly predicted 49 out of 50 state outcomes and the District of Columbia. And in 2012, he correctly predicted all 50 state outcomes and the District of Columbia. So while news reports were saying that the election race was neck and neck, he argued early on that it wasn't, argued early on that President Obama would have a second term in office, and wound up being correct. So it was a huge coup for the idea of big data and the use of big data and statistical analysis to predict outcomes. All right, you may be wondering, well, why is she here? Why is she talking to us? Okay? As a statistics professor, I have 3 components of work: research, teaching, and service. So with research, I do a lot of work developing statistical methods. My particular focus is on count data, so I mean literally counts, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and how they relate to each other, and depending on a particular application problem. So I can ask various problems about that. With teaching, I not only teach various statistics courses at the undergraduate and graduate levels, but I also have student researchers working with me on various projects and presenting our work together at national and international conferences. For the service component, I actually work on or have particular interests in diversifying the field of statistics with respect to both gender and racial diversity. So as an African-American female statistician, I am small in number related to the overall whole. So my goal is to help encourage you to consider statistics as a career choice. Okay, here is a particular example, what's called the Infinite Possibilities Conference for Underrepresented Minority Women. So as I said, with regard to research, not only do I work on statistical methods in terms of developing the theories, but I also work on applied projects as well and consulting projects that vary in interest. One example that I worked on some years ago was working with image analysis to try and develop a user-friendly, if you will, in the doctor office system to allow you to study blood samples and study protein change in the body. And so with the work and collaboration with a particular scientist and his lab, we looked at several experiments to try and help him fine-tune his product. So what I'm going to do is discuss some of these experiments and show you what the ultimate goal was. All right, so this first image is representative of an experiment that we did to understand just the impact of the camera that was being used to take the ultimate images that the scientist was collecting for his analysis. And what you may see here is this sort of pattern through the image, okay? And as a statistician, that's what we're doing. We're looking for patterns. We're trying to extract those patterns to understand what lies underneath, okay? And so I'm not sure just how well you can see this, but you probably easily see 5 bars, horizontal bars. But if you look more closely, it actually divides in columns as well. So there are actually 20 tiles on this picture, okay? So if you take those tiles and extract the commonality that lay between them, you get what we call a residual image. And if you think about what happens in regression analysis, you have your residuals. That's what's left over. So we have some statistical terminology to describe it, but in essence, what you'll often hear is that we call it a white noise pattern. So by a white noise pattern, the parents in the room will appreciate this. This is like that old television screen when television went dark, and so you just heard the right? That's that image, okay? That's what it's represented as for white noise. So this is what you want to see. So that told us that our story behind the image or the picture made sense, and being able to extract it, there doesn't seem to be much else going on here, which is fine. A latter experiment served to understand what was happening with the base of the apparatus, how that might contribute to what we're seeing in our ultimate image, okay? And so in taking images of this base, again, you can more easily see the 20 tiles that appear here. For the backstory, the reason that the scientist was collecting 20 tile images is because it turned out the camera could not sufficiently take a picture of the entire base as a whole. So he had to move the camera around and accumulate these images to make an ultimate image of the base, okay? So that's the backstory with what's happening here. And with these 30-second snapshots, it's producing this sort of black hole picture in each case. So again, what are we doing? We're extracting the pattern that we see in our image, and we want to see what's left. Now, what you're hoping to see is something like that white noise pattern like we saw before. Instead, we saw this. Can you see anything in this picture? Does it look like that white noise like we saw before? It's not looking like the white noise anymore. So what's happening here? See, this was our CSI moment, if you will, okay? We sat down with the collaborator. We're asking him, how is this base being created? And he went through this long explanation of how the students in his lab are using, get this, remember we're trying to make a cost-effective apparatus. So what was he using? Black duct tape. But the students are not touching the apparatus. Everything is supposed to be a clean surface. Does that look clean to you? No. So in fact, what were we realizing? That the people in his laboratory were using fingerprints, leaving fingerprints behind. That's what you're seeing, these blotches, okay? And the lines that you're seeing are literally from trying to roll out this line of duct tape and slap it down, smooth it out, so it's leaving a crease, and then continuing the process. So you're seeing this happening behind the scenes, okay? So what's wrong with this? That it's impacting the data, okay? So now, being able to account for this, it was a good life lesson for our collaborator. He was able to change his apparatus to something more smooth. And so in the end, we were able to produce pictures like this. This is one of two images that we would have representing protein imaging, okay? And so the idea is to see how proteins change, say, in a healthy state versus a disease state. That was the overall picture for the scientist. Now, some other famous statisticians that you may or may not know of. Florence Nightingale is one. You probably know her as a nurse, but however, she was a statistician as well. She was very influential in working with statistical graphics and produced what's called a polar area diagram. And so you can think of it as a pie chart and on steroids almost, okay? So as you can see, you see the pie chart going around, but it's going outward as well. So you can think of that outward movement as a histogram and a pie chart working together. And as you see, she was the first female elected to the Royal Statistical Society. Another famous statistician is David Blackwell, who is very well known if you pursue statistics as a career choice for his work in probability and game theory. He was actually the first black scholar admitted to the National Academy of Sciences, and he's most widely known for what's called the Rao-Blackwell theorem, which is a fundamental theorem in statistics. And as you can see, he was posthumously awarded the National Medal of Science by President Obama just last year. This picture is just serving to show that I actually met him when I was a lowly graduate student. So this was my first experience as a statistics groupie. And another statistics groupie moment was when I met David Cox, who, as you can see, wrote or co-authored 300 papers in books. He's, as you can see, still alive. He's most well known for what's called the Cox proportional hazards model. So if you all even pursue medicine as a career choice, you will undoubtedly hear this name for that model. What it does is look at the relationship between various variables and how it impacts your health, okay, or survival. And to note the importance of this man, it's worth noting that he's not Mr. Cox, he's not Dr. Cox, he is Sir David Cox, which means that he was knighted by Queen Elizabeth, not here, this just serves to point out the image, he was knighted by Queen Elizabeth in 1985 for his work in statistics. If I haven't convinced you that statistics is a career choice, notice that it is one of the top selected jobs. This was back in 2011, but we're still considered a top job in the Wall Street Journal. And so you'd see news reports like this. Data cruncher is now the cool kids on campus. Data science, the sexiest job of the 21st century. So notice, so to the kids in here, people will want you for your mind, not just your body, okay? So in closing, hopefully I've convinced you that there's a lot of marketability to serve as a statistician. There are lots of interesting problems, whether in theory or methods or application. And it's always interesting to solve mysteries. So in closing, I'd like to end with a quote from W.E. Deming, which says, "In God we trust, all others bring data." Thank you.